A good example of succession is the hydrarch succession or hydrozer, figure 8.2, in which a pond and its community are converted into a land community. In the initial stage, phytoplankton e.g., some blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, green algae e.g., Spirogyra, Odogonium, diatoms and bacteria are the pioneer colonizers. They are consumed by zooplankton e.g., protozoans such as amoeba, paramecium, euglena, etc., fish such as bluegill fish, sunfish, largemouth, etc. Gradually these organisms die and increase the content of dead organic matter in the pond. This is utilized by bacteria and fungi, and minerals are released after the decomposition. The nutrient-rich mud then supports the growth of rooted hydrophytes such as hydrilla, alodia, vallisneria, ceratophyllum, etc., in the shallow water zone. This submerged stage is also inhabited by the animals such as dragonflies, mayflies and crustaceans such as acellas, gammarus, daphnia, cypress, cyclops, etc. The hydrophytes die and are decomposed by microorganisms, thus releasing nutrients. In addition to this, due to silting, the water depth of the pond is reduced and at the margin of the pond grow rooted floating vegetation, i.e., the plant species whose leaves reach the water surface and roots remain in the mud. Plants such as Nelumba nucifera, Trappa, Monocoria, etc., grow in these conditions. In floating stage faunal living space is increased and diversified. Hydras, frogs, salamanders, gill-breathing snails, diving beetles, disticus, and host of new insects capable of utilizing jointer surfaces of floating leaves appear. Some turtles and snakes also invade the pond. IIEECEBNBEE. Gradually the water depth in the pond decreases due to evaporation and the deposition of organic matter and the concentration of the nutrients increases. Free-floating plants such as azolla, lemna, pistia, wolfia, spirodella, etc., increase in number because of the high nutrient availability. Gradually their dead parts fill up the pond ecosystem, resulting in the further buildup of the substratum. At this stage, the pond becomes a swampy ecosystem. The reed swamp species such as Sherpus orbalrushes, typhar cattail, phragmites, reed grass, rumex, etc., and sedges e.g., carex, juncus, cypress, etc., invade the pond and the latter are gradually replaced by mesic communities as the water depth is reduced greatly. Gradually land plants, such as shrubs, salix, cornus, and trees populus, almus invade ending in the climax community such as deciduous forest, figure 8.2. In association with the changes in water depth and vegetation, the aquatic fauna also change and ultimately gets replaced by land animals. Thus, possible trend of succession in the aquatic environment is as follows: climax community. D. Open scrub land equals deciduous forest. D. Terrestrial communities. N. Mesic communities. G. Reeds and sedges. D. Free-floating and rooted plants. 4. Rooted and aquatic plants. N. Phytoplankton. N. Pond ecosystem. Climax communities vary from place to place. For example, in low-lying lands in some parts of Kashmir, the climax community has trees such as Salix ambushed, 1988. In Indian upland plateaus, the climax woody species consist of Diospyros, Butea and Ziziphus and ground vegetation of Aragrostis, Sporobolus, Bothriochloa, etc. Climax vegetation of lowlands and valleys which provide a mesic environment includes Terminalia, Ficus, Sterculia, Salix, etc. 2. Succession in xeric habitat. Xerozer or xerarch succession begins on exposed parent rocks, lithozer, or dry sand, samozer. A lithozer figure 8.3 involves the following stages: Crustus lichen stage, pioneers, folios lichen stage equals moss stage equals herb stage, shrub stage, forest stage, climax stage. Thus, pioneer plants are lichens, mosses and selaginella, which help in soil formation by accelerating erosion. In course of time grasses, annuals and herbaceous vegetation grow on the soils deposited on rocks. Like the hydrozer, the lithozer involves successive changes in animal life. The pioneer animals of the lichen stages are few species of mites, ants and spiders. These animals are exposed to harsh environments such as extreme fluctuations in temperature. During the moss stage, many new species of mites, small spiders, tardigrades and springtails invade the community. The herb stage is characterized by nematodes, mites, collembola, ants and various insect larvae. During the shrub and forest stages great qualitative and quantitative modifications occur in the fauna. Thus, there occur numerous kinds of animals such as slugs, snails, wireworms, millipedes, centipedes, mites, ants, sowbugs, springtails, amphibians such as salamanders, frogs, etc., reptiles such as turtles, skinks and other lizards, snakes, birds such as flycatcher and grouse, and mammals such as mole, mouse, shrews, squirrels, chipmunk and fox. CONCEPTOF climax. The concept of climax has since long been a subject of much controversy and discussion. There are following three theory: T equals rock equals K. Cal approaches to the climax equals GPP Chen underscore L. The preclimax. The preclimax is a vegetation of lower life forms than the one adjacent to it and results from different edaphic conditions. The postclimax is a strip of vegetation of higher life forms occurring within a climate climax. For example, a forest along a stream in a grassland community constitutes postclimax community. Later on, numerous other terms such as coclimax, superclimax, quasi-climax, anticlimax, pseudoclimax, etc., were coined by some post-clemens ecologists to describe specific situations. The monoclimax theory is supported by Cowles, Ranganathan, and Puri, but strongly objected by Daubenmeier, 1968. 2. Polyclimax theory. This theory was developed by Tansley. This theory considers that the climax vegetation of region consists of not just one type but a mosaic of vegetational climaxes controlled by soil moisture, soil nutrients, topography, slope exposure, fire and animal activity. The advocates of polyclimax theory prefer to call each stable community as a climax and describe them with the prefixes edaphic climax, topographic climax, biotic, zootic, grazing or anthropogenic climax and fire climax. For example, grassland communities of central India, Sri Lanka and parts of California have developed under the influence of fire, grazing and other biotic factors and so have been considered as biotic climaxes by Misra, Pandya and Holmes. 3. Climax pattern hypothesis. This theory was developed by Whitaker, McClantosh and Selak. According to this theory, the composition, species structure and balance of a climax community are determined by the total environment of the ecosystem and not by one aspect, such as climate alone. Involved are the characteristics of each species population, their biotic interrelationships, availability of flora and fauna to colonize the area, the chance dispersal of seeds and animals, and the soils and climate. The pattern of climax vegetation will change as the environment changes. Thus, the climax community presents a pattern of populations that corresponds with and changes with the pattern of environmental gradients, intergrading to form ecoclines. The central and most widespread community in the pattern is the prevailing or climatic climax. It is the community that most clearly expresses the climate of the area. 4. Information theory. This theory was proposed by Leith, Odom and Gali. It considered succession and climax in terms of ecosystem development. In autotrophic succession, ecosystem development, diversity of species tends to increase with an increase in organic matter content and biomass supported by the available energy. Thus, in a climax community, the available energy and biomass, which is called information content, increase. In contrast to it, in a heterotrophic succession occurs a gradual depletion of energy, because the rates of respiration always exceed production rates. However, in an ecosystem both the autotrophic and heterotrophic successions operates in a coordinate manner. The autotrophic individuals derive mineral elements from the soil and atmosphere, while the heterotrophic individuals carry on the return of the nutrients to soil and atmosphere, through decomposition of complex dead organic matter. Thus, succession reaches a stage, the climax stage, when the amount of energy and nutrients received from the environment by the plants is again returned in more or less similar amount to the environment by decomposition through heterotrophs. Certain recent models of succession. Connell and Sladier, 1977, have proposed the following 3 models to accommodate different possible pathways of succession. 1. Facilitation model. It is based on the Clements ideas of relay communities in which the seral community is believed to modify. According to this model, each new community in course of time prepares suitable ground to facilitate its own replacement by another better suited community. So each community, like a relay process, delivers the habitat to next or higher status community. This model has not been supported by any proper evidence. 2. Tolerance model. This model is based on the concept of IFC or initial floritic composition, which suggests that arrival of new invaders of higher life form types necessarily does not eliminate pioneers. According to this model, only such higher succession or climax species are able to join which can be tolerated by the early settlers. So, the tolerance model differs from Clements' relay succession model in the sense that as the succession proceeds, more and higher life form plants are tolerated to join and coexist, than necessarily replacing the earlier component species. With the passage of time, species which mutually tolerate each other gain control over the habitat to form the climax vegetation. 3. Inhibition model. According to this model, the early arrived species populations on a new habitat may develop countermechanism to normal replacement process. For example, the allelopathy may be the common counteracting adaptation to thwart or inhibit the entry of late arriving species. This kind of highly adapted early stage Clements gave the idea of relay community. Communities may not be common on a wide range of habitats. In such a case, relay succession gains control only after the death of the allelopathic plants. Since inhibition model lacks universality, so it was also criticized. Resource ratio hypothesis of succession. This model was proposed by Tillman, 1985, who has agreed to Clements' idea of replacement of communities. According to him, the resources of the habitat are regarded as the key factor. Limited resource leads to competition. Due to competition, a resource ratio is created for each kind of resource. Depending on the newly created ratio level, new species adapted to it succeeds. In conclusion, succession is directional and progresses towards the climax. In some cases, it may be non-directional, i.e., it returns to a particular stage and it is cyclic. It takes hundreds and thousands of years to complete primary succession, while the secondary succession is quicker, takes 10 to 200 years for its completion. In some cases, the initial stage community may inhibit altogether the process of succession by allochemic inhibition of new arrivals. Community evolution. Like the responses of communities to changing abiotic conditions, community evolution involves progressive changes in climax communities. Because the evolution is exceedingly slow, it cannot be observed in operation, and few instances from the fossil record are sufficiently complete to show the process in action. The example that best demonstrates evolution of the basic structure of the community is that of the development of a terrestrial community of a modern type by early reptiles some 250 million years ago. Between the time when vertebrates, amphibians, first became able to lead a predominant terrestrial existence some 350 million years ago and the establishment of an essentially modern type food web some 100 million years later, the structure of terrestrial community was decidedly different from what it is now. Development of the modern type of community structure required not only a complete rearrangement of the niche structure of the community but also the evolution of new species that could fill the new niches. Olson, 1961, 1966. Attainment of the adaptations needed for terrestrial life by the first amphibians did not in itself establish a land-based vertebrate community. These early amphibians were carnivores, and the only animals inhabiting the land environment were insects. It is unbelievable that the clumsy locomotor system of early amphibians would have allowed them to prey effectively on animals such as insects. Thus, the first communities inhabited by terrestrial vertebrates are best regarded as extensions of aquatic communities, with the land habit as an adaptation to improve the capabilities of organisms whose prime food supply was aquatic invertebrates and fish. By some 300 million years ago, reptiles had evolved that could feed effectively on terrestrial invertebrates. An entirely land-based community was theoretically possible in which all herbivore niches were assumed by invertebrates and some of the carnivore niches by vertebrates. However, the paleoecological evidences suggest that most contemporary carnivorous vertebrates were unable as yet to realize an entirely terrestrial carnivore niche, so that the great majority of the energy flow through the community continued to pass through the aquatic route. The typical food chain to the highest terrestrial vertebrate carnivore was plant aquatic invertebrate feeding vertebrate semi-aquatic predator terrestrial predator. By 250 million years ago, terrestrial herbivorous vertebrates had evolved and a fully terrestrial vertebrates community could come into being. From this time onward, the basic structure of the terrestrial community was of an essentially modern sort, with all consumer trophic levels occupied by a wide range of animals, both vertebrates and invertebrates. Such evolutionary changes in the structure of communities are caused by a large number of factors. One factor is changes in the regional climate. It became progressively drier during the period under consideration, and the development of land-based community reasonably responded to this sort of change. Indeed, many evolutionary changes in community structure can be explained on the basis of responses of major changes in the regional abiotic factors of the environment. Axelrod, 1950, 1958. Both chief factors of evolutionary change in community include reorganization of the community structure in response to the realization of niches that had not previously existed in the community. RUAYR. Our Earth is a giant ecosystem where abiotic and biotic components react with each other, bringing functional changes. Ecosystem. Structure and function. NY ecological unit that includes all the organisms, i.e., the communities in a given area which interact among themselves and with the physical environment, so that a flow of energy leads to clearly defined trophic structure. Biotic diversity and material cycle, i.e., exchange of materials within the system, is known as ecological system or ecosystem. There exist nutritional relationships or food links amongst the living organisms of such a system. Keeping this in view, the Earth can be considered as a giant ecosystem where abiotic and biotic components are constantly acting and reacting upon each other, bringing forth structural and functional changes in it. This vast ecosystem, the biosphere, is difficult to handle and, thus, for the sake of convenience, we generally study nature by making its artificial subdivisions into units of smaller ecosystems, such as terrestrial, forest, desert, grassland, aquatic, freshwater, marine, and man-made, cropland, etc. An ecosystem may, thus, be as small as a single log, a pond, a cropland, or as large as an ocean, desert, or forest. Though these unit ecosystems are separated from each other with time and space, but functionally they all are linked with each other, forming an integrated whole. The term ecosystem was proposed by A.G. Tansley in 1935. SF. Z. Phi. Climate regime. There are many other parallel terms ecosystem I, or synonyms for the ecosystem 1T, which have been proposed by very and else ecologists, e.g., Biosinensis O. Mangadsersum, Carl Mobius, S. 1877, M.I. Procosm, Forest Far Na DSS Engineer, Fresh, A. S.A. Forbes. One. Natural ecosystems. These types of ecosystems operate by themselves without any major interference by man. Based upon the particular kind of habitat, these are further classified as I. Terrestrial ecosystems such as forests, grasslands, deserts, a single log, etc. E. Aquatic ecosystems, which may be further distinguished as follows. A. Freshwater ecosystems. These may be lotic, running water as spring, brook, stream or river, or lentic, standing water as lake, pond, pool, puddle, ditch, swamp, etc. B. Marine ecosystems. These include saltwater bodies, which may be deep bodies as an ocean or shallow ones as a sea or estuary. 2. Artificial ecosystems. These are also called man-made or man-engineered ecosystems. These are maintained artificially by man where, by addition of energy and plant manipulations, natural balance is disturbed regularly, e.g., croplands such as sugarcane, maize, wheat, rice fields, orchards, gardens, villages, cities, dams, aquarium and manned spaceship. Microecosystems. Natural ecosystems are usually large in size. In them numerous variables, factors operate at one time, leading to great complexity. As a result, it becomes usually difficult to study them with the normal scientific methods. Thus, to reduce the number of variables and to work in a system with a discrete boundary, ecologists are trying to simulate microecosystems in a laboratory, which can be replicated and manipulated at will. The microsystems can be laboratory systems built by taking one or very few species at a time from exenic cultures, and exenic culture is a bacterial culture that consists of only one species, and studying them in desired combinations. Recently, the concept of polyaxenic cultures has been developed. Odom 1971 and others have elucidated the microecosystem concept. Struc Toure of ECO system. The structure of an ecosystem is basically a description of the species of organisms that are present, including information on their life histories, populations and distribution in space. It is a guide to who's who in the ecosystem. It also includes descriptive information on the non-living physical features of environment, including the amount and distribution of nutrients. An ecosystem typically has two major components. A. Abiotic or non-living components. Abiotic component of the ecosystem comprises three sort of components. 1. Climatic condition and physical factors of the given region such as air, water, soil, temperature, light, i.e., its duration and intensity, moisture, relative humidity, pH, etc. 2. Inorganic substances such as water, carbon, C, nitrogen, N, sulfur, S, phosphorus, P, and so on, all of which are involved in cycling of materials in the ecosystem, i.e., biogeochemical cycles. The amount of these inorganic substances, present at any given time in an ecosystem, is designated as the standing state or standing quality. 3. Organic substances such as proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, humic substances, etc., present either in the biomass or in the environment, i.e., biochemical structure that link the biotic and abiotic components of the ecosystem. B. Biotic or living components. In the trophic structure of any ecosystem, living organisms are distinguished on the basis of their nutritional relationships, which are discussed as follows. 1. Autotrophic component. Autotrophic, auto equals self, troph equals nourishing component of ecosystem includes the producers or energy transducers which convert solar energy into chemical energy that becomes locked in complex organic substances such as carbohydrate, lipid, protein, etc. with the help of simple inorganic substances such as water and carbon dioxide and organic substances such as enzymes. Autotrophs fall into following two groups. I. Photoautotrophs which contain green photosynthetic pigment chlorophyll to transduct the solar or light energy of sun, e.g., trees, grasses, algae, other tiny phytoplanktons and photosynthetic bacteria and cyanobacteria equals blue-green algae. E. Chemoautotrophs which use energy generated in oxidation reduction process, but their significance in the ecosystem as producers is minimal, e.g., microorganisms such as Beggiatoa, sulfur bacteria, etc. 2. Heterotrophic component. In the heterotrophic, hetero equals other, trophic equals nourishing, organisms predominate the activities of utilization, rearrangement and decomposition of complex organic materials. Heterotrophic organisms are also called consumers, as they consume the matter built up by the producers, autotrophs. The consumers are of following two main types. A. Macroconsumers. These are also called phagotrophs, phago equals to eat, and include mainly animals which ingest other organisms or chunks of organic matter. Depending on their food habits, consumers may either be herbivores, plant eaters, or carnivores, flesh eaters. Herbivores live on living plants and are also known as primary consumers. Microconsumers break down complex organic compounds of dead or living protoplasm, absorb some of the decomposition or breakdown products and release inorganic nutrients in the environment, making them available again to autotrophs or producers. Some invertebrate animals such as protozoa, oligocata such as earthworms, etc., use the dead organic matter for their food, as they have essential enzymes and, hence, can be classified as decomposer organisms. Some ecologists believe that microorganisms are primary decomposers, while invertebrates are secondary detritivores act on organic detritus as ANQ breaks it down to release inorganic nutrient decomposers. The disintegrating dead organic matter is also known as organic detritus, Latin word deterre means to wear away. By the action of detritivores equals decomposers, the disintegrating detritus result into particulate organic matter (POM) and dissolved organic matter (DOM), which play important role in the maintenance of the edaphic environment. EXAMPIEOFECO system. A pond as a whole serves as a good example of an aquatic and freshwater ecosystem, figure 9.2. In fact, it represents a self-sufficient and self-regulating system. It has following components. 1. Abiotic component. The chief non-living or abiotic substances are heat, light, pH value of water, and the basic inorganic and organic compounds, such as water itself, carbon dioxide gas, oxygen gas, calcium, nitrogen, phosphates, amino acids, humic acid, etc. Inorganic salts occur in the form of phosphates, nitrates and chlorides of sodium, potassium and calcium. Some proportion of nutrients exist in solution state, but most of them are present as stored in particulate matter as well as in living organisms. 2. Biotic component. It includes various organisms which are classified into the following types of producers. These are photoautotrophic green plants and photosynthetic bacteria. The producers fix radiant energy of sun, and with the help of minerals derived from water and mud, they manufacture complex organic substances as carbohydrates, proteins and lipids. Producers of pond are of following types. Macrophytes. These include mainly the rooted large-sized plants which comprise 3 types of hydrophytes, partly or completely submerged, floating and emergent aquatic plants. The common plants are species of Trappa, Typha, Eleocharis, Sagittaria, Nymphaea, Potamogeddon, Chara, Hydrilla, Vallisneria, Utricularia, Marsilia, Nelumba, etc. Besides these plants, some free-floating forms also occur in the pond ecosystem, e.g., Azolla, Salvinia, Wolffia, Eichhornia, Spirodela, Lemna, etc. Phytoplanktons. These are microscopic minute floating or suspended lower plants, algae, that are distributed throughout the water, but mainly in the photic zone. Most of them are filamentous algae such as Spirogyra, Eulothrix, Zygnema, Cladophora and Odygonium. There also occur some chlorococcals, e.g., Chlorolaclosterium, Cosmarium, Eudorina, Pandorina, Pediastrum, Cendesmus, Volvox, Diatoms, Anabana, Gloetrichia, Microcystis, Oscillatoria, Chlamydomonas, Spirulina, etc., and some flagellates. Macroconsumers. They are phagotropic heterotrophs which depend for their nutrition on the organic food manufactured by producers, the green plants. Macroconsumers are of following 3 types. Herbivores, primary consumers. These animals feed directly on living plants, producers, or plant remains. They may be large or minute in size and are of following 2 types. 1. Benthos, which are the bottom-dwelling forms such as fish, insect larvae, beetles, mites, mollusks, e.g., Pila. 2. Zooplanktons, which feed chiefly on phytoplanktons and are chiefly the rotifers as Brachionis, Asplanchna, Licane, etc., although some protozoans as Euglena, Coleps, Dileptus, etc., and crustaceans such as Cyclops, Stenocyprus, etc., are also present in the pond. Besides these small-sized herbivores, some mammals such as cow, buffaloes, etc., also visit the pond casually and feed on marginal rooted macrophytes. Some birds also regularly visit the pond to feed on some hydrophytes. Carnivore order 1, secondary consumers. These carnivores feed on the herbivores and include chiefly insects, fish and amphibians, frog. Most insects are water beetles which feed on zooplanktons. Some insects are the nymphs of dragonflies which feed upon aquatic insects. Carnivore order 2, tertiary consumers. These are some large fish as game fish that feed on the smaller fish and, thus, become the tertiary top consumers. Decomposers. They are also called microconsumers, since they absorb only a fraction of the decomposed organic matter. They bring about the decomposition of dead organic matter of both producers, plants, as well as macroconsumers, animals, to simple forms. Decomposers help in returning of mineral elements again to the medium of the pond and in running biogeochemical cycles. Decomposers of pond ecosystem include chiefly bacteria, actinomycetes and fungi. Among fungi, species of Aspergillus, Cephalosporium, Cladosporium, Pythium, Rhizopus, Penicillium, Thelivia, Alternaria, Trichoderms, Circinella, Fusarium, Curvularis, Polycoelomyces, Cyprillenia, etc., are most common decomposers in water and mud of the pond.